Good morning. I'm doing a little bit of work on belief right now, so I thought I'd just talk to the camera for a while, in case anybody's interested. And I'm particularly kind of exploring kind of two aspects of belief, or as they exist in some of the literature. A belief which is very embodied, which is sometimes called intuitive beliefs, or Aliefs, and I'll refer to that, who says that in a minute. And kind of more reflective, explicit, possibly rational understandings of the word belief. Because I think it's really evident that that when we make expressions about what we believe, you know, when we fill in census forms to say what religion we are, for example, or we just get in conversations and we say, do you believe in ghosts? Yes. Do you believe in ghosts? No. Those kind of things. They are expressions of belief, and they do, I imagine, honestly reflect what we hold to be true. But quite often they don't necessarily conform to how we act, and quite often to stand in stark contrast to how we act. We often act as if we believe very different things. You know, if someone didn't have access to what we say, to our explicit statements about our belief, and just judged us on our actions, in some cases they might think that we believe something very different. For example, I don't believe in ghosts, but I know I do walk past churchyards at night. You make of that what you will. And there's quite a bit of literature on this. And I guess I'm looking at somebody like a person called Tamar Gendler. I'll put a link to one of her articles in the description box from the Journal of Philosophy, 2008, I think. And she comes up with this term Alief and distinguishes it from belief. It's kind of a catchy word, but when she says Alief, she's really talking about those kind of embodied intuitions that we have about the world around us, contrasting that, as I say, with more reflective, stated, explicit beliefs. And she uses examples like, for example, the Sky Bridge at the Grand Canyon, which is a glass bridge which extends out 70 feet over the chasm. And you can walk along this glass and look down a mile down to the rocks below. And you know, and apparently, if you walk along the Sky Bridge, you could buy a photograph of yourself saying, "I did it," as if you've completed some sort of challenge. And it's not entirely bogus, because many people will have the experience of completing a very difficult task. Because whilst on the one hand they believe that this bridge will hold their weight, there are 5 layers of 2-inch thick glass beneath their feet, supported on metal trusses that are deeply embedded into the canyon's walls. Of course, they explicitly believe that this is going to hold their weight. Every fibre of their being, in some cases, is telling them that they're about to fall to their death at any moment. So there's a really felt stark contrast. And of course we all feel that, don't we? Roller coasters are kind of built around that. We know, if we're going to Disneyland, that the roller coaster will not crash, and yet we go on the roller coaster with our body telling us we're about to die at any moment. So we operate in these two beliefs. Now you may want to have a different word for these, but I'm just using the words as they're used, as I say, in the literature. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm finding interesting about these two things is to do with how we respond to that, particularly with something like religions. There's a really great book by Tanya Luhrmann, I think she's called When God Talks Back. Came out a few years ago. Actually, only a couple of years ago, 2012, I think, maybe, something like that, 2011. When God Talks Back, and it's an account of some research she did about evangelicals, American evangelical Christians. And she's saying that they have a particularly difficult task, because she's saying that what their ambition is to bring into alignment the stated beliefs they have about the presence of God and their intuitions. Because we might think that, well, I don't know, we can have all kinds of things, but certainly her research amongst evangelical Christians, you know, talking to them anonymously, getting real data from them, is that most of them, most of the time, do not feel the presence of God. They'll say that they do. They say that they affirm those beliefs. Their explicit statements about the presence of God are very forthright and very clear. but most of the time they don't feel the presence of God. All their intuitions are telling them that either there is no God or God is not revealing himself. With just very brief moments occasionally for some of them when they do get that sense that God is with them. Outside of the Tanya Luhrmann's book, the most famous example of that, I guess, would be somebody like Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and you don't get much more religious than Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who towards the end of her life, whilst making very explicit statements about her faith in the existence of God, towards the end of her life, as I say, said she hadn't felt the presence of God for the last 30 years. Which is quite a thing, isn't it, really? But as I said, the Luhrmann's book says that the challenge that evangelicals face is one of bringing these things into alignment. They want their intuitions to match up to their reflective statements. They are overtly saying, and in fact making creedal promises about their belief in the existence of a certain kind of deity. But a lot of the time they don't feel it because it's a difficult thing to feel. So Luhrmann claims that a lot of the practices that are associated with evangelical Christianity, a certain kind of way of listening to one's own thoughts, attributing certain kinds of thoughts to a divine agency, hearing the voice of God within scripture and text. These are some of the strategies which apparently have been developed to try to kind of prime their intuitions to match the reflective statements about the presence of God. And it only occasionally works. As I say, most evangelicals apparently do not feel that presence of God most of the time. There is a secondary thing, of course, which evangelicals do at that point, and this is not meant to be condemnatory, it's just descriptive, which is that that not feeling the presence of God and yet making explicit commitments to the faith is itself seen as a virtue. It becomes virtuous even if you don't feel the truth of what you're saying to continue to say it, which is a kind of interesting strategy to develop. So yeah, I think the challenge for atheists or non-believers is kind of a different one. Again, I'm not being value judgmental here, make of it what you will. But for many atheists, and I guess I'll put myself in this camp, again, of course we also have that distinction between our intuitively felt sense of what the situation is that we're in, our Aliefs, as Gendler calls it, these intuitive embodied sense of what is true. And we also have our explicit reflective beliefs. And if you look, for example, amongst not the general pool of atheists, but some atheists who are perhaps explicitly anti-theist, positive atheists, as I think Anthony Flew calls them, people who say that they believe that there is no God, as opposed to the lacking belief thing. Some people do say that they believe there is no God, right? So that's a belief. And yet some people who say they believe there is no God will, on occasions, act as if they think there is. There's an old saying, isn't there, about no atheists in foxholes, and whilst that's widely wrong, for the most part apparently, there are occasions in which that does manifest. But I suppose the difference there, the challenge for that kind of atheist or other kinds of people who are more invested in perhaps rationality or perhaps more reflective modes of thought, would not be to try to bring their intuitions in line with their stated beliefs. Or would it? It would. Yeah, maybe it would. Maybe it would be to bring their intuitions about the world in line with their stated beliefs on occasions. So, for example, if I know that there are no ghosts, I might think, well, it's just ridiculous to walk quickly past this churchyard. I'm going to slow down and just get used to it. Or if I'm at the Sky Bridge at the Grand Canyon, maybe I'll think to myself, I know rationally there is no danger of me falling. I will just try to calm down and try to bring my intuitions in line with my explicit reflective beliefs about the state of the world. I might even go on a roller coaster and try to suppress those feelings or eradicate or think myself out of those feelings of fear. Seems a bit pointless, but I could potentially do that. So to the extent that we, or non-believers, or believers in certain kinds of rational propositions, might want to bring our intuitions in line with that, it would be more a case of prioritizing the certain kinds of rational statements. And either, as I say, bringing intuitions in line with that so we don't feel scared in churchyards, or alternatively recognizing these things and what they are, and just perhaps using the embodied sense of fear or the embodied sense of arousal or something like that as a kind of entertainment, which is, I guess, what roller coasters are about, which I guess is what horror films are about. We know there's no monster coming out of the screen to get us, but we allow ourselves the pleasure of feeling the fear anyway. Yeah. So the evangelical thing I do find interesting. I'll put a couple of links. I'll put a link to the. I won't put a link to. I haven't got the copy of the When God Talks Back book, but I'll put a link to a good review of it by Pascal Boyer, the anthropologist, who talks us through it, and also a link to some preprints of the Gendler article on Aliefs and B-Aliefs, just to give a bit of background to that if anybody's interested. I'm not sure I've been very coherent, but yeah, I'll follow this up with some more stuff, I think. Thanks very much.